Hello everyone, a warm welcome to you from SGT University. Today we are here to discuss a common disorder in which both eyes do not look exactly the same direction at the same time, which is known as squint or we can say strabismus as well. This is usually a self-diagnosable condition, and for that we have an expert from ophthalmology department, Dr. A.K. Khurana. Welcome sir. Sir is an experienced strabismologist as well as the president of Strabismus and Pediatric Ophthalmological Society of India. Sir has written many number of books, and the mainly about strabismus is theory and practice of squint and orthoptics. Sir, we are very pleased to have you here. I'll appreciate if you tell to our audience what exactly squint or strabismus is.
Thank you, Priyanka. It's a pleasure to interact with you on the concepts and misconceptions about the squint. You have rightly said that squint refers to malalignment of the two eyes. So, in common language, it is also called tedapan, tirchapan, or teary eyes. However, to understand the definition of squint scientifically, first we need to know what is the normal position of the eyes, so that we can understand then what is abnormal position of the eyes. So when we talk about the normal position of the eyes, that means in primary position. Primary position refers to the position of the eyes when we are looking straight forward with our head straight. And in this condition, the two eyes are always parallel to each other. And this parallelism is normally maintained in all directions of gaze, whether we are looking up, down, right or left. So why I want to say is that if sometime in primary position when we are looking straight, there may not be squint. However, when you are looking up or down or right or left or even oblique position, squint may appear. So the definition of squint scientifically is the malalignment of the two eyes either in the primary position or in any secondary or tertiary position of the eyes. That is basically strabismus. So here we also need to know why and how normally the two eyes are parallel to each other.
Exactly.
Yes. And this is the function of the extraocular muscles. There is a set of 6 extraocular muscles in each eye, and one muscle from each eye acts in cohesion with the muscles of the other eye. So these are called the yoke muscles. So they act together, and so the two eyes are kept parallel not only in primary position but all positions of the gaze. So whenever there is any deficiency of the one of the muscles, then misalignment will occur. So basically these muscles, they play a great role in the balance of the two eyes.
So, what are the common conditions which leads to this misalignment or we can say squint?
It's a very good question, because unless and until we know the cause, it will be very difficult to treat this squint. So basically there are many causes of squint, and so in each case there may be a different cause.
Okay.
So it's not possible to say there is a single cause of this squint.
Okay.
And further I will like to say here that to understand how the squint develops, we first should know how the normal position is developed. It's very important to tell you that when a child is born, the two eyes are not coordinating with each other, they are independent. So if in the first 3 or 4 months of the age, if the parents are worried that their child is having squint, so we need to just assure them, because the normal position of the two eyes, that is the parallel to eye, is achieved after birth. And this period's process starts from the 3 to 6 months of age and is completed by 6 to 7 years of age. And this period of development of normal coordination of the two eyes is called the critical period of development. So here I want to say that if during this critical period there is any obstacle to the development of normal binocular vision and normal coordination of the eye, then strabismus will occur. So these various obstacles which can occur during this period, they can be basically, we can group them into 3 groups. The first group being the sensory obstacles, that are the sensory causes. Second being the motor obstacles, that is the motor causes. And third being the central, which are related to the higher functions. So these are the various causes. So if we talk of the what are the sensory obstacles, so the most important out of these is refractive error. If a child is born with a refractive error and if we don't correct it time, he or she may develop squint. And especially if there is anisometropia, one eye is having more refractive error as compared to the other. Similarly, not only this, sometimes what happens that a wrong prescription is given. Even a wrong spectacle use can also cause strabismus.
Okay.
So this is the most important sensory cause of the squint. Then other causes can be starting from anterior to posterior. Suppose there is a corneal opacity, child developed because of trauma or some injury or some infection. Even the loss of vision due to corneal opacity will ultimately develop into squint. Similarly, some children are born with developmental cataract, or there may occur a traumatic cataract in early childhood. So that can also lead on to the squint. Similarly, the disease of the retina, especially the sensitive part of the retina, that is the macular region. Sometimes a small child may be born with congenital toxoplasmosis, and its only manifestation is squint. And when, as an ophthalmologist, we examine the fundus, we rule out that is the cause is a toxoplasmosis. Similarly, disease of the optic nerve, optic atrophy, can also manifest. Not only this, even simple, sometimes a child is born with a complete ptosis, that is the drooping of the upper eyelid, and that upper eyelid covers the pupillary area, so vision doesn't go, and automatically there is an obstacle to the development of normal binocular vision and coordination of the eyes, leading to strabismus formation. So we have to find out which is the sensory cause, and we need to treat accordingly.
Okay.
So this was the sensory causes. Then we come on to the motor causes. So what are the motor causes? Motor causes basically relate to the normal balance between the position of the two eyes. And this position, as I already told you, is by the set of extraocular muscles. So if there is any defect in the extraocular muscles or their nerve supply, that will automatically present as squint. And the defect in the muscles can be in the form of a faulty insertion, or inherent weakness of one muscle, or an overpower of the other muscle. And similarly, in the nerves there can be palsies or paresis, and this can be because of many causes again. Can be infections, inflammations, tumors. So, and sometimes in elderly also it can occur because of the vasculopathy, especially in diabetes, hypertension, and so. So that may be the motor causes. So then coming on to the central causes. Central causes, as you know, all functions of our body are ultimately controlled by higher center. Supranuclear control in the cortex is there. And these centers, they basically give us the power to fuse the images of the two eyes, to fuse the vision in the two eyes, and so a balance is maintained. So sometimes there can be deficiency of the fusional faculty. Moreover, higher centers may be defective in patients with cerebral palsy, certain syndromes like Down syndrome, or sometimes because of traumas or infections involving the central nervous system. So when the central control is gone, again squint can occur. So these are basically three types of the obstacles which can cause squint in each case, and cause will differ depending upon each case.
Sir, can we classify this squint into many types as well?
Yes, yes. As we have already said, there are various causes of the squint. So are the various types of the squint.
Okay.
So we can classify in various methods. So when a child is brought to an ophthalmologist with the complaint of squint, so first of all we need to know, so that we can tell the parents also which type of squint it is. And first of all, rather we need to tell them whether there is squint or not. Many times what happens that the eye looks apparently that there is a squint in that eye, but when an ophthalmologist examines, there is no squint. So this condition we call as pseudostrabismus. And there are some important causes of the pseudostrabismus. The most common is then prominent epicanthal folds. As shown in this diagram or the photograph of the patient, there is a prominent epicanthal fold which are covering the nasal white part of the eyes, and so apparently it looks as if the child is having a medial curve squint. So as shown in this figure again, when I am pinching the skin of the nose bridge and the epicanthal folds, the squint looks disappearing. So this is basically pseudostrabismus. Similarly, if our eyes are placed apart more than the normal distance, that is we have a normal IPD, that is interpupillary distance between the two eyes. So if it is more sometimes congenitally, then it looks as if the child is having a divergent squint. Similarly, technically again there are the angle kappa, which is between the optical axis and the pupillary line. So if the angle kappa is negative, then it looks as if child is having esotropia or convergent squint, and if it is a positive, it looks as if child is having exotropia. So once we have seen the child is having a true squint, then we need to know which type of the squint. Further, it is of two types. Okay? So true squint basically when the parent bring to us child, that is always a manifest squint. That is obvious they are seeing. However, there is one more type of this squint, true squint, that is called the hidden squint or latent squint. in which the parents usually don't note that there is a squint. However, the child is brought with certain other symptoms like pain in the eyes, ache in the eyes, tiredness of the eyes, difficulty in reading, and child may say that the birds disappear or there is overlapping of the birds. So basically this all happens because there is a overuse of the fusion. And so once the fusion is overused, the child will get all these symptoms, and these as a group are called the asthenopic symptoms or the asthenopia. So when we examine such child, simple by a cover test, so what will happen? The hidden squint basically is a tendency to deviate when the fusion is gone. But normally when the two eyes are open, the fusion is being used. So when we will cover one eye, so under the cover this eye will deviate depending upon which type of hidden squint is there. If it is an esotropia, that is inward deviation, then the eye will deviate medially under the cover, that we call as the esophoria. So basically term phoria is used for all hidden squints, phorias or latent squints. So similarly, if the eye deviates outward, then it is exophoria. So this is basically phorias or the hidden squint, which can be esophoria, exophoria, hyperphoria and cyclophoria also. So this the parent don't know, but we tell them that this is the problem and it has got simple treatment by exercises or sometimes glasses. But now let us come on to the main, there is the upper end squint or manifest squint, about which the parents are always worried. So that can also be of various types, and then that can be classified in different ways. First of all, as I already told you, depending upon the direction of deviation. So if eye is deviated inward, we call it as esotropia or convergent squint. If eye is deviated outwards, we call it exotropia or divergent squint. If eye has gone upwards, we call it hypertropia. And if the eye is sometimes obliquely also, there can be torsional movement, that is called cyclotropia. So this is depending upon the direction. Then each type depending upon the etiology also can be classified. So that we can take up one by one.
Okay.
For example, if it is esotropia, the esotropia can be because of only refractive error, and we call them as accommodative refractive. And this can be only treated by the glasses itself. Sometimes if it is occurring from the childhood, it is called congenital esotropia or infantile esotropia. Sometimes it is occurring late, then it is called late. So this manifests basically, here again I want to tell you that all these types of the manifest squint basically can be two types further.
Okay.
One is concomitant, another is incomitant. Concomitant means the degree or the amount of squint that will remain same in all directions, looking straight, primary position, looking right, left, up or down. So these are concomitant. The another group is incomitant, in which the squint may vary in amount depending upon the direction. And most of the times the incomitant squints occur because of the paralysis of the nerve or the muscle. For example, I just given one example. My right lateral rectus is paralyzed. So what will happen? This lateral rectus is having no power. My medial rectus will have move the eye toward inward, and so it will become a incomitant or paralytic convergent squint, right? So this amount is seen in the primary position. Now, if we ask that patient to look toward the right, so when the patient will look toward the right, my right lateral rectus is paralyzed, it will not move, but medial rectus of the left eye is normal, so it is moving normally. So the amount of squint will become much more because one muscle is stable, other eye is moving. At the same time, if we ask the child to look on the opposite side, that is toward the left, then what will happen? My right medial rectus is all right, so it will move medially, and left lateral rectus is also all right, it will also move. So you may not find even a squint at all in the patient. So this is a basically incomitant squint. So these are the various types of squint.
Sir, please share the clinical profile or clinical workup for a patient of a squint.
Okay. So as Priyanka, I told you that there are various causes of squint and there are various types of the squint. So accordingly, clinical profile will also change depending upon the type and cause of the squint. So let us start first of all. Most of the parents, they bring the child with a manifest squint, that is an apparent squint. So they may come with the complaint of that this eye was having slight deviation which is increasing slowly and now it is not. So this usually occurs when the squint in the beginning, as I told you already, is a hidden squint, phoria, which slowly converts into an intermittent. Intermittent means squint occurs at some time apparently and then it doesn't occur because of the use of fusion. So that is a intermittent stage. Then later on this intermittent stage may convert into a constant stage. and that is the time when usually the parents are worried and they bring the child. Then this constant squint clinical profile, sometimes what happens, it can be unilateral. That always the parents will say, sir, the right eye or left eye is diverging. Sometimes there is because of the fusal power and in the coordination of the two eyes happen in such a way that the child may deviate right eye once and left eye once. So this we call is in a clinical profile as the alternate squint. So it may be an alternate divergent squint or alternate convergent squint. So in addition to that, sometimes the child or even adults they develop a sudden squint, and that sudden squint normally will manifest in the form of a diplopia. So that will be first. The parents will be frightened, the patient will be frightened, and immediately as an emergency they bring, I am seeing two. So that we have to see then which muscle is weak, because the diplopia will occur only when the two muscles. Slowly and slowly, there occurs adjustment and then this diplopia disappears. Similarly, sometimes they may say there is a confusion. Confusion means that, for example, this one eye I am seeing this spot, and the other squinting eye I am seeing this mug. So these two pictures will be confused in the brain, and so the child may have a confusion. And sometimes similarly there will be past pointing. Past pointing is a feature always which is associated with the weakness of the muscle. So when we are asked to point towards the thing, toward the muscle which is weak, for example, my left lateral rectus is weak, and you ask me to point finger on this, so I will need more power in this, and this more power in the brain will be perceived as here. So my finger will go here. So we will miss the targets. So these are the clinical profile usually with which the patients come. Of course, when we examine these patients, we find out first of all vision, because I told you many times refractive error may be the cause. So that is most important to find out the vision and the reflection of the patient. Then we measure and look into the ocular movements, whether they are equal or there is any restriction. One muscle is overacting and the other is underacting. So after doing this, then we need to measure the amount of skin, how much it is. So it can be measured in the degrees or most commonly in the prism diameters. And this measurement is required ultimately for the management point of view. So there are various tests, the most common being the prism bar cover test with which we measure the squint. So after we have measured the squint, we do the sensory evaluation. Because the sensory evaluation is the most essential part, not only in the assessment but also in the management. Because I told you earlier that we have got an binocular single vision normally, and that gives us a depth of perception. And in a day-to-day life, to have a normal depth of perception, you can understand how important it is. And especially in certain professions, it is highly, and they may be even unfit for that. So we have to test what is the degree of binocular vision in this patient as a clinical profile. There is a grade 1 that is called simultaneous perception, grade 2 that is fusion, and grade 3 is stereopsis. So all these, so we do all these tests, and that will complete the complete picture of the clinical profile, and then we will note down all this.
Sir, I'll appreciate if you share all the treatment modalities regarding this squint, and is there any myth related to the treatment part as well?
Yes, Priyanka, you have rightly said that before we talk about the treatment, we should clarify the myths, which is very important. In our public, laymen at large, especially in villages, there are many myths about the squint. And the first of them is that the squint is a sign of good luck, and they don't get their child treated. This is very, very unfortunate. And second myth about them, those who don't take it as a good luck, they consider it a disease, but they have a concept that this either will be automatically corrected when the child grows, or if at all required, we can get it treated when the child is mature enough. But it's very unfortunate that by that time, not only that we have lost vision in one eye, that is called the amblyopia, because that eye is being not used, and this child will not develop binocular single vision. So what is the no depth perception at all any times. So that's the myth which need to be clarified, that the treatment should be given as early as possible when this squint is diagnosed. And third myth is that they think when they bring the child, we advise them treatment, they will say operation kar do it now or later, just do the surgery. This is again myth. Because many types of the squint, they can be simply treated by the spectacles or prisms or exercises. So all these three myths should be cleared before we start of the treatment. So now coming on to what is the treatment of squint. So first of all, we need to know that what are our goals of treating squint. So our goal is not only cosmetic correction, that is only one part. Of course, the parents and the public at large is mainly concerned by the cosmetic, but as an ophthalmologist, as a strabismologist, I will say it is just tip of the iceberg. Our main aim should be to have a good vision in both the eyes. So amblyopia need to be treated before giving the treatment to the squint. Secondly, our aim should be to have a binocular single vision in both the eyes so that the child gets a normal depth perception also. And for this we need to give certain exercises which are prescribed. I will not go in detail of that. And last is the cosmetic correction that can be achieved sometimes even without surgery. Of course, most of the time you need a surgery.
Okay.
So when we plan surgery, it can be done under general anesthesia in children, and in adults we can do it under local anesthesia. Here again I will just talk of the basic principles of the surgery. The basic principle of surgery is that we have to strengthen the weak muscle and we have to weaken the strong muscle so that a balance is maintained and the eyes are centered. And for this I told you we will first measure and then calculate how much surgery should be done. And these Comnes surgery for weakening a muscle is called recession and for strengthening a muscle is called resection. Then even after surgery, that has to be made clear to the parents that the child has to use the glasses, child may have to continue the exercises to maintain the binocular vision, to maintain the, otherwise sometimes recurrences may occur. At the same time we also tell the parents sometimes a second surgery may be required so that their concepts are clear.
Sir, you are working in SGT since so long, so would you like to share your experience working here with the patients of squint?
Yes, Priyanka, we get almost all types of squint cases here. So when after retiring from PGIMS Rohtak, I joined here, I thought we will not be getting such complicated cases because patients usually go to the higher center. But I must say now SGT is having a very good name on all around the area, and we have treated many simple as well as complicated cases. I will just like to share photographs of some of the patients which were complicated, we treated here, and they are very, very happy parents as well as the patients.
Sir, please share some take-home points or message for our audience.
So basically the take-home messages are the same which I have already highlighted, but let us revise them again. First of all, I want to say to the public at large that please clarify myths about squint from your mind. Squint is a treatable condition, it is not a sign of good luck, and the best results can be achieved by early treatment. Because I already said the treatment of squint doesn't mean only the cosmetic. So if we want to have good vision, we have to have binocular vision, we need to treat the squint at the earliest possible. And for our ophthalmologists, the best is we should have a thorough clinical workup, thorough diagnostic workup, have a complete plan of surgery, because we have to win the confidence of the parents and children, and also we have to give them the best results. So that's my message.
So today we had Dr. Khurana with us, and sir has beautifully explained and cleared our all doubts and myths regarding the squint and strabismus. Thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable time with us and your experience in working with SGT as well. Thank you.